The prison gates opened at exactly 7 a.m. on a cold November morning. I walked out carrying everything I owned in a clear plastic bag, some letters, a photo of my daughter from before she betrayed me, and $43 in gate money. My name is Thomas Bennett, and I just served 22 months in federal prison for a crime I didn't commit. A crime my own daughter, Hannah, had helped her husband frame me for. I stood outside the gates, breathing free air for the first time in nearly 2 years, and waited. Nobody was coming to pick me up, I'd made sure of that. I didn't want anyone from my old life seeing me like this, broken and hollow. A taxi pulled up after I called. The driver looked at me, recognized the prison behind me, and his expression shifted to barely concealed judgment. "Where to?" "County Courthouse," I said, climbing into the back seat. He didn't ask questions. I wasn't ready to explain why my first stop as a free man was the place where justice had failed me so completely. 24 months ago, I'd been a successful accountant with my own firm. Bennett and Associates had 23 employees and handled accounts for dozens of small businesses. I'd built it over 30 years, starting from nothing. My daughter Hannah had been my pride and joy. I'd raised her alone after her mother died when she was 6. She'd gone to college, gotten her MBA, and married a man named Pierce Ashford who came from old money. I should have seen the warning signs. Pierce had been charming at first, but over the 3 years of their marriage, he'd slowly isolated Hannah from me. Fewer phone calls, missed holidays, excuses why they couldn't visit. Then Pierce approached me with a business proposition. His family's investment firm wanted to partner with me on a commercial real estate deal. The numbers looked good, the contracts seemed legitimate, and most importantly, Hannah had assured me Pierce was trustworthy. "Dad, this is a great opportunity for you," she'd said over dinner at their expensive downtown apartment. "Pierce's family has connections you could never get otherwise." I'd believed her. She was my daughter. Why wouldn't I trust her? The deal involved me transferring company funds, $2 million, into a joint investment account. Pierce's firm would match it, and we'd purchase and develop a commercial property. The projected returns were excellent. I transferred the money on a Tuesday. By Friday it was gone. Pierce claimed the account had been hacked, that someone had stolen all the funds. He filed a police report. I contacted my lawyer. And then, 3 days later, the FBI showed up at my office. They arrested me for embezzlement and wire fraud. According to their investigation, I'd stolen $2 million from my own company and tried to hide it by creating a fake investment scheme. "Mr. Bennett, we have evidence that you created fraudulent contracts, forged your business partner's signatures, and transferred company funds to your personal accounts," the lead agent told me. "That's impossible. I invested in a legitimate deal with Pierce Ashford. Pierce Ashford has provided us with extensive documentation showing that you approached him with this fraudulent scheme, and he refused to participate. He's cooperating fully with our investigation." My blood ran cold. He's lying. My daughter was there. She can confirm. Your daughter has also provided testimony. She states that you'd been acting erratically, that she was worried about your mental health. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Hannah was testifying against me? My own daughter? My lawyer, Kenneth Price, tried to build a defense, but the evidence against me was overwhelming. Bank records showing transfers from my business to accounts in my name. Emails discussing the investment that had clearly been doctored to make me look guilty. Testimony from Pierce and Hannah describing my desperate behavior. "Thomas, I'll be honest," Kenneth told me before trial. "This doesn't look good. They have documentation, witness testimony, financial records. Unless we can prove Pierce fabricated all of this, you're likely going to prison." "He did fabricate it. He stole my money and framed me." "I believe you. But proving it is another matter. Pierce comes from a wealthy, connected family. He has resources and credibility. You're a small business owner who admits to transferring $2 million based on a handshake deal with your son-in-law. To a jury, that looks either criminally stupid or criminally intentional. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution painted me as a desperate man who'd stolen from his own company to support a lavish lifestyle I couldn't afford. They presented falsified evidence of gambling debts, secret bank accounts, and fraudulent transactions. Pierce testified in a tailored suit, his voice steady and convincing. I tried to help Thomas. He was family. But when I realized he was asking me to participate in fraud, I had to refuse and report it. Then Hannah took the stand. My daughter, wearing a conservative dress, her hair pulled back, looking every inch the concerned daughter trying to protect others from her unstable father. Ms. Ashford, can you describe your father's behavior in the months before his arrest? The prosecutor asked. He was erratic, Hannah said, not meeting my eyes. Angry when we wouldn't give him money. He kept talking about a big deal that would solve all his problems. When Pierce refused to participate, Dad became hostile. Did you believe your father was capable of committing fraud? She hesitated, and for a moment, I thought she might tell the truth. But then, yes. I think my father was desperate and made terrible choices. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shake her, demand to know what Pierce had done to make her lie like this. But Kenneth put his hand on my arm, keeping me seated. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced me to 24 months in federal prison and ordered me to pay restitution of $2 million I didn't have. Prison was exactly as terrible as you'd imagine. I was 62 years old, surrounded by men half my age, many of them violent criminals. I kept my head down, worked in the prison library, and tried to survive each day. But I wasn't idle. I had a lot of time to think, to analyze what had happened. And slowly, pieces started coming together. Pierce had planned this from the beginning. He'd married Hannah to get close to me, to my business, to my money. He'd isolated her, manipulated her, and eventually convinced her to participate in destroying me. For what? His family was wealthy. Why go through such an elaborate scheme to steal $2 million? I requested all the financial documents from my case. I studied them obsessively, looking for patterns, for anything that didn't make sense. And I found it. Hidden in the bank records was a trail, barely visible, easy to miss, showing that the money hadn't stayed in my personal accounts, as the prosecution claimed. It had been transferred through a series of shell companies, eventually ending up somewhere offshore. Shell companies that, with enough digging, I traced back to Pierce's family investment firm. He hadn't just stolen my money. He'd used me to launder money for his family's firm, creating a fall guy who'd take the blame if anyone ever investigated. I tried to bring this information to Kenneth, but he was skeptical. Thomas, you were convicted. Bringing new theories. Now, especially ones that implicate powerful people, won't get you anywhere without concrete proof. Then help me get concrete proof. I'm a defense attorney, not an investigator. And I'm being honest, your daughter's testimony was damaging. Unless she recants, which seems unlikely, any appeals will fail. He was right about one thing. Hannah was the key. Pierce had manipulated her into betraying me, but she was still my daughter. Somewhere inside, the girl I'd raised had to still exist. I started writing to her. Letter after letter, sent from prison to the expensive downtown apartment I'd never be welcome in again. The first 10 letters came back unopened. The next 10 disappeared. She must have been throwing them away. But I kept writing. Hannah, I know what Pierce did to me. I know he's using you. I know you didn't understand what you were part of. Please, just talk to me. Let me explain what really happened. In month 18 of my sentence, I finally got a response. Not a letter, a visit request. Hannah was coming to see me. The visiting room was full of families. Wives visiting husbands, mothers visiting sons, children visiting fathers. And then there was Hannah, sitting across from me at a metal table, looking thin and exhausted. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly. "Hi, sweetheart." We sat in awkward silence for a moment. Finally, Hannah said, "I got your letters. All of them. I wasn't sure you were reading them. I read every one." She looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years, doubt. "Pierce doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I'm at a spa weekend with friends." "Why did you come?" "Because I need to know the truth. Did you really steal that money?" I looked at my daughter, the child I'd raised and loved and sacrificed everything for. "No. Pierce stole it and framed me. And you helped him whether you knew it or not." She flinched. He said you'd say that? He said you'd try to manipulate me. Hannah, think about what happened. Really think. When did Pierce first suggest you testify against me? He didn't suggest it. The prosecutor asked me to. After Pierce told them you'd cooperate. When did he start telling you I was unstable? Hannah's face went pale. How did you know he said that? Because it's in the trial transcript. But more importantly, when did it start? Before or after I transferred the money? She was quiet for a long moment. Before. He started saying you were acting strange about 6 months before the deal. But Dad, you were stressed. Your business was struggling. My business wasn't struggling. Pierce told you it was. He was setting this up long before the investment deal even happened. I could see her processing this, fighting against years of Pierce's manipulation. He showed me documents. Financial statements proving your company was in trouble. Did you verify them independently? Or did you just trust what Pierce showed you? Her hands started shaking. He's my husband. I trusted him. And I'm your father. You should have trusted me. Tears started streaming down her face. I didn't want to believe you'd steal. But the evidence, the FBI, everything pointed to you. And Pierce was so convincing. He said he was protecting me from the scandal, that testifying was the only way to save our family's reputation. Hannah, Pierce married you to get to my money. Everything he's done has been calculated to steal from me and make you an accomplice in his crime. Hannah stood up abruptly. I need to go. This is too much. Wait. But she was already walking toward the exit. The guard started moving toward me, and I knew I couldn't follow. Hannah! I called out. Check the shell companies. The money went through firms registered in Delaware. Trace them back to Pierce's family. She paused at the door, just for a second, then disappeared. I sat there for the rest of visiting hours, hoping she'd come back. She didn't. But 4 months later, when I was released from prison, I found out what she'd done with that information. The taxi pulled up to the county courthouse. I paid the driver and walked up the steps I'd last climbed on my way to sentencing. This time, I was here for a different reason. Inside, I found the records office and requested copies of recent divorce filings. The clerk looked bored until I gave her the names, Hannah Bennett Ashford and Pierce Ashford. That case is sealed, she said, suddenly much more interested. Are you a party to the proceedings? I'm the plaintiff's father. She looked at me with something like sympathy. There's a hearing this afternoon at 2 p.m. Courtroom 4. Public attendance is allowed. I had 3 hours to kill. I found a diner across the street and ordered coffee and breakfast, the first real meal I'd chosen for myself in 22 months. My phone, a cheap prepaid model I'd bought with gate money, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Dad, I know you're out. I'm sorry I couldn't pick you up. See you at the courthouse. So Hannah knew I'd come here first. Of course she did. She knew me better than I'd thought. At 1:45 p.m., I walked into courtroom 4. It was mostly empty except for a few attorneys reviewing files and a court reporter setting up. I took a seat in the back row and waited. At 1:55, Hannah walked in with her lawyer. She looked different, stronger, more like the daughter I remembered from before Pierce. When she saw me, she smiled nervously and gave a small wave. Then Pierce arrived with his legal team, 3 expensive attorneys in matching suits. When he saw me, his expression flickered, just for a second, from confident to worried. He should be worried. The judge entered, and the hearing began. This wasn't the divorce hearing itself, but a motion hearing. Pierce's attorneys were arguing against Hannah's request to unseal financial records from Pierce's family investment firm. Your Honor, Pierce's lead attorney argued, these records are proprietary business information. Mrs. Ashford's fishing expedition is nothing more than a vindictive attempt to harm my client's family business in the context of a bitter divorce. Hannah's attorney, a sharp woman named Charlotte Kim, stood up. Your Honor, these aren't just divorce proceedings. My client has uncovered evidence that Mr. Ashford used her father's criminal case as part of a money laundering scheme. We believe the financial records will prove this fraud and potentially exonerate Mr. Thomas Bennett, who was wrongfully convicted. The courtroom stirred. Pierce's face went red. The judge leaned forward with interest. That's a serious allegation, Ms. Kim. What evidence do you have? We have preliminary findings from a forensic accountant showing that the money allegedly stolen by Mr. Bennett was transferred through multiple shell companies, all registered to entities controlled by the Ashford family investment firm. We believe Pierce Ashford orchestrated Thomas Bennett's conviction to cover up his own embezzlement and money laundering. Pierce's attorney jumped up. This is outrageous speculation. My client was a witness to Mr. Bennett's crimes, not a participant. The judge held up her hand. I'll hear from Mrs. Ashford directly. Please approach the witness stand. Hannah stood up, her hands trembling slightly, and walked to the witness box. Mrs. Ashford, the judge said, you testified against your father in his criminal trial. Are you now saying that testimony was false? Yes, Your Honor, Hannah said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. I testified based on what my husband told me. He manipulated me into believing my father was unstable and had committed fraud. I didn't understand that I was part of a scheme to frame my father. When did you discover this? My father sent me letters from prison. At first, I didn't believe him, but he asked me to verify the financial records independently. When I did, I found discrepancies in what Pierce had shown me versus what actually happened. What kind of discrepancies? Pierce showed me documents claiming my father's business was failing. But when I checked with the actual accountants, the business was healthy. He showed me emails that supposedly proved my father was planning fraud. But when I had a digital forensics expert examine the metadata, they'd been created after the fact and backdated. The courtroom was silent. Pierce looked like he wanted to run. I hired my own investigator, Hannah continued. He traced the money through the shell companies my father identified. Every company connects back to Ashford Investment Holdings, Pierce's family firm. The judge looked at Pierce. Mr. Ashford, these are serious allegations. Do you have a response? Pierce's lawyer whispered urgently to him, but Pierce stood up. Your Honor, my wife has been under tremendous stress. Our marriage is ending, and she's clearly trying to blame me for her father's crimes rather than accept the truth. The truth is that you married me to access my father's business, Hannah interrupted, her voice stronger now. You isolated me from him, manipulated me into testifying against him, and stole $2 million while making him take the blame. You have no proof of that. I have 3 years of financial records showing systematic transfers from the stolen money through your family's shell companies. I have emails from your personal account discussing the Bennett problem and how to neutralize it. And I have testimony from your family's accountant who agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. Pierce went pale. His attorneys looked shocked. Clearly, this was news to them. The judge turned to Hannah's attorney. Ms. Kim, do you have this evidence? Yes, Your Honor. And we've already provided it to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They've opened an investigation into Mr. Ashford and Ashford Investment Holdings. The judge took a long moment to process this. Finally, she said, this hearing is adjourned. Mr. Ashford's motion to seal financial records is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering all evidence in this case to be provided to the U.S. Attorney immediately. She looked at me sitting in the back row. Mr. Bennett, I assume you're aware of these developments? I just learned about them this morning, Your Honor. You may want to contact your criminal defense attorney. Based on what I've heard today, you may have grounds for a wrongful conviction appeal. The hearing ended. Pierce's attorneys rushed him out a side door, probably to prevent him from saying anything else incriminating. Hannah stood in the witness box, looking drained but relieved. I walked down the aisle toward her. She stepped down from the witness stand, and we met in the middle of the courtroom. Dad, she said, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I wanted to stay angry. I wanted to make her feel the pain I'd felt in prison. But she was my daughter, and she'd spent 4 months secretly building the case that would free me. I hugged her, and she sobbed into my shoulder. We went to Charlotte Kim's office after the hearing. Hannah had prepared a folder for me, copies of all the evidence she'd gathered, timeline of events, contact information for the forensic accountant and digital expert she'd hired. When did you start investigating? I asked. The day after I visited you in prison. You told me to check the shell companies. I hired a private investigator that same week. And you've been working on this for 4 months? While pretending everything was normal with Pierce. While sleeping in the same house as him, eating dinner with him, acting like the dutiful wife. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Charlotte explained the legal situation. The evidence Hannah gathered is substantial. The U.S. attorney is taking it seriously. They're looking at money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy charges against Pierce and potentially other members of the Ashford family. What about my conviction? We're filing a motion to vacate based on new evidence and prosecutorial misconduct. The prosecution relied heavily on Pierce's testimony, which we can now prove was perjured. Your conviction should be overturned. How long will that take? Given the strength of the evidence, possibly only a few months. In the meantime, we can request that your record be flagged as under review. Hannah looked at me nervously. Dad, I know I can't undo what I did. I sent my own father to prison because I was stupid enough to believe Pierce's lies. I don't expect you to forgive me. You were manipulated by someone you loved and trusted. I'm angry, but I understand. I should have trusted you. You raised me, loved me, gave me everything. And when it mattered most, I chose him over you. You also spent 4 months risking everything to expose him and clear my name. That counts for something. Charlotte left us alone in her conference room. Hannah pulled out another folder. There's something else you should know. The $2 million Pierce stole? I found it. My heart stopped. Where? Offshore account in the Cayman Islands, registered to one of the shell companies. I have the account numbers and documentation. Once your conviction is overturned, you can file to recover it. How did you access Pierce's offshore accounts? Hannah looked embarrassed. I knew his passwords. He used the same ones for everything. I logged into his email and found communications with the offshore bank. The accountant I hired helped me trace the rest. Over the next 3 months, everything unraveled for Pierce Ashford. The U.S. attorney filed charges against him for fraud, money laundering, and perjury. The evidence Hannah had gathered was damning: emails, financial transfers, testimony from cooperating witnesses. Pierce's father, Howard Ashford, was also indicted. It turned out the scheme had been Howard's idea. He'd been running a money laundering operation through his investment firm for years. When it started attracting attention from regulators, he needed a scapegoat. I was the perfect target, connected through family, trusting, and with access to enough money to make the crime seem plausible. Pierce had married Hannah specifically to get close to me. The whole relationship had been a con from the start. How do you feel about that? I asked Hannah over coffee one afternoon. Stupid. Used. Angry. But also relieved to know the truth. I spent 3 years thinking something was wrong with me, that I wasn't good enough for him. Now I know he never loved me at all. He was just using me. That's on him, not you. I still fell for it. I still testified against you. Under false pretenses. Hannah, you've spent months making this right. At some point, you need to forgive yourself. My conviction was officially vacated in month 4. The judge who'd sentenced me issued a formal apology, acknowledging that the prosecution's case had been built on fabricated evidence and perjured testimony. The government began proceedings to recover my $2 million plus interest and damages. Pierce's offshore accounts were frozen. I was awarded full restitution. But money wasn't what I cared about most. My business was gone, shuttered while I was in prison, my clients scattered, my employees moved on to other firms. My reputation was destroyed. Even with my conviction overturned, people would always remember that I'd been arrested, charged, and convicted. You could start over, Hannah suggested. Start a new firm. I'd help you. I'm 64 years old. I spent 22 months in prison. I don't know if I have the energy to rebuild. Then do something else. Consulting. Teaching. Forensic accounting. You're an expert now at spotting fraud. She had a point. I'd spent nearly 2 years analyzing the fraud that had been committed against me. I understood money laundering, shell companies, and financial manipulation better than most people in the field. A week later, I got a call from the U.S. Attorney's office. They wanted to hire me as a consultant to help with other financial fraud cases. Your experience gives you unique insight, Mr. Bennett, the prosecutor explained. You understand how these schemes work from the inside. I accepted. It wasn't the career I'd planned, but it was meaningful work. I was helping catch criminals like Pierce and Howard Ashford. Pierce's trial happened 9 months after my release. I attended every day, watching from the gallery as the prosecution systematically destroyed his defense. Hannah testified against him, just as she'd once testified against me. But this time, her testimony was truthful. She explained how Pierce had isolated her from me, how he'd manipulated her into doubting me, how he'd coached her on what to say at my trial. Did you know your testimony was false when you gave it? The prosecutor asked. No. I believed what Pierce told me. He was my husband. I trusted him. When did you realize he'd been lying? When my father asked me to verify Pierce's claims independently. Everything Pierce had told me, about my father's financial troubles, his erratic behavior, his fraudulent plans, none of it was true. It had all been manufactured. Pierce's attorney tried to paint Hannah as a scorned wife seeking revenge. But the financial evidence was overwhelming. The jury convicted him on all counts after just 4 hours of deliberation. Howard Ashford pleaded guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. At 73, he'd spend the next 10 years in federal prison. Pierce was sentenced to 15 years. The day of Pierce's sentencing, I sat in the courtroom next to Hannah. The judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I stood up and faced Pierce across the courtroom. You didn't just steal my money. You stole 22 months of my life. You destroyed my business, my reputation, and my relationship with my daughter. You made me doubt myself, question whether I was actually losing my mind when I insisted I was innocent. Pierce stared at the floor, not meeting my eyes. But you failed, I continued. You thought I'd be just another victim who'd serve my time and disappear. Instead, I fought back. My daughter fought back. And now you're the one going to prison while I rebuild my life. The judge sentenced Pierce to 15 years. As they led him away in handcuffs, he finally looked at me. I saw fear in his eyes, and I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Outside the courthouse, Hannah and I stood on the steps where, nearly 3 years earlier, I'd been led away in handcuffs myself. It's over, Hannah said. The criminal case is over. Rebuilding our relationship is going to take longer. She nodded. I know. But I'm willing to do the work if you are. Over the next year, Hannah and I slowly rebuilt our relationship. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of hurt, a lot of broken trust that needed mending. We started with weekly dinners, just the two of us. We talked about everything. Her childhood, my mistakes as a father, her marriage to Pierce, my time in prison. No topic was off limits. I should have seen the warning signs, Hannah admitted during one dinner. Pierce isolated me from you so gradually that I didn't notice until it was done. First, it was just being too busy for Sunday dinners. Then skipping holidays. Then only seeing you when he was there to supervise. He was a professional manipulator. Don't blame yourself. But I do blame myself. You raised me to think critically, to question things. I abandoned all that training because I was in love. Love makes us vulnerable. Pierce exploited that vulnerability. She started therapy to process the trauma of realizing her entire marriage had been a con. I went with her sometimes, to family sessions where we worked through the damage that had been done to our relationship. Slowly, painfully we healed. 2 years after my release, I was offered a position teaching forensic accounting at a local university. The department head had followed my case and was impressed by my consulting work. You have real-world experience most academics can only read about, she told me. Your students would benefit enormously from learning from someone who's lived through financial fraud firsthand. I accepted. Teaching gave me purpose and allowed me to help the next generation of accountants recognize and prevent the kind of fraud I'd experienced. Hannah completed her divorce and started her own business, a consulting firm that helped fraud victims navigate the legal and financial aftermath of being scammed. She turned her painful experience into something meaningful. I can't undo what I did to you, she told me on the anniversary of my release. but I can help make sure other families don't go through what we did. We were having dinner at her new apartment, a modest place, nothing like the luxury she'd had with Pierce. She was rebuilding her life just as I was rebuilding mine. "I'm proud of you," I told her. She started crying. "I don't deserve that. I sent you to prison. You were manipulated into participating in a crime you didn't understand. Then you risked everything to expose the truth. You deserve to be proud of yourself." 3 years after my release, I received a letter from Pierce in prison. Hannah had received one too, and we opened them together. "Thomas, I know you'll never forgive me and I don't deserve forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I think about what I did to you every day. My father raised me to see people as marks, as opportunities to exploit. He taught me that family connections were just business tools. I married Hannah not because I loved her, but because you were a perfect target, trusting, wealthy enough to make the crime worthwhile, and likely to believe your daughter over anyone else. I destroyed your life, your business, and your relationship with Hannah. I took 22 months from you that you'll never get back. There's nothing I can say to make that right. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did, and I'm sorry. Pierce." I read the letter twice. "What do you think?" Hannah looked at her own letter, similar content, with an added apology for using her and lying about loving her. "I think he's sorry he got caught," she said. "But I don't think he truly understands what he did to us. How do you fake loving someone for 3 years? How do you systematically destroy a father-daughter relationship and feel nothing? Sociopaths don't feel empathy the way normal people do. To Pierce, we were never real people. Just obstacles and tools." We threw the letters away. Neither of us wanted to carry Pierce's guilt for him. 5 years after my release, I stood at the university's graduation ceremony watching my students receive their degrees in accounting. Several of them had taken my forensic accounting course and were going on to careers in fraud investigation. Hannah sat next to me, her consulting business thriving. She'd helped over 50 fraud victims navigate their recovery, using the painful lessons from our own experience to guide others. "Mom would be proud of you," I told her. "She'd be proud of both of us. We survived something that would have destroyed most families." She was right. Pierce and Howard had tried to destroy us. They'd stolen my money, sent me to prison, and turned my daughter into an unwitting accomplice in their crimes. They'd calculated every move, manipulated every situation, and nearly succeeded. But they'd underestimated 2 things: my determination to prove my innocence, and Hannah's courage to face the truth even when it meant admitting she'd been fooled. My daughter had sent me to prison for 22 months because of her husband's scheme. The day I was released, she'd been waiting at the courthouse with evidence that would eventually free me and send Pierce to prison instead. That betrayal had nearly destroyed our relationship. But rebuilding it, earning back each other's trust, had made it stronger than it had ever been before. Pierce had stolen 22 months of my life. But he'd failed to steal what mattered most: my daughter's love, my integrity, and my determination to live a meaningful life despite his efforts to destroy me. I'd survived prison. I'd cleared my name. I'd rebuilt my career and my relationship with Hannah. And every day that Pierce sat in a federal prison cell, knowing that his scheme had ultimately failed, was a small measure of justice. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's living well despite everything they took from you. And that's exactly what Hannah and I had done.